22 of us, the personal relationship with our teachers. And that was because our community chose to have that personal relationship, to pay, to reward, and to encourage. When I listened to the governor's educational comments, the governor's educational advisor, and he can deny that that was said, we have the authority for it, I am reminded of that we are no longer from raising our hands to taking a number. And the ability that is unassailably proven in studies is that classroom size matters. They can talk about, oh, we're not going to lay off a firefighter, for example. We're just not going to buy him a truck. That means one less truck to go to the firefighter. That means one cop in a car instead of two. Sure, the police are still there, but they are not there to respond, as we unfortunately saw in Zanesville just a few days ago, about the ability to marshal our forces when tragedy strikes. When we lose that ability to coordinate and to assimilate a critical threat to the community, as will happen when these authorities no longer have the ability to collectively bargain, we will place our citizens at risk. He is right. It's not about a scare tactic. It's about explaining how this bill works. When we allow the last say to those who make the first offer, there is no bargaining. It is an essential tenet for that bargaining to work is that both sides come to the table equally armed and equally strengthened for the advancement of the interests of the communities they serve. There's not a single teacher or firefighter who does this job. A firefighter has the highest incidences of issues with occupational safety. It's because they run into burning buildings when everyone else runs out. Teachers, because they are now required for what they bargain to seek advanced degrees and educational opportunities, of course advance those degrees because of the need to keep their students ahead of the curve. They are 20 years older than the students that they teach. To stay fresh, to stay with their students, they seek this. They seek this through collective bargaining and the opportunity to reward through collective bargaining, not because it raises their salaries, but because to compete with the students who, if you've ever sat in a classroom, are the most remarkably demanding young people I have ever met. Senate Bill 5 strikes at that delicate balance of equal people seated equally at the table to drive equally monitored goals. And for me to hear that it is a disastrous situation today because of elected officials' inability to negotiate well, and somehow by rigging the rules so that they have the final say in this uneven tug of war, suggests an irrationality and an inability that escapes reality.
Rhonda, could we ask you a quick question? You watched the debate.
Sure.
Just a little feedback from you on how you thought it went and whether, if you were a viewer, would it have affected your thinking?
Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to be here, and I think did a great job, especially talking about teacher voice, and so key to student achievement. If teachers don't have the voice, our class size could definitely be a lot higher than what it is now. We already know that 30 students in a classroom is too much, but that's something we have to live with. But if we don't have that voice, can you imagine 50 students in one classroom? I want you to raise your hand for the teacher if you want your child or your niece or your nephew in a classroom with more than 50 students. Our teachers give voice around making sure there is art, music, and physical education for elementary students in the classroom. We bargain about things like making sure there are foreign languages offered in high schools so that our students can be global citizens. So we look not only at bread and butter issues, but we bargain over what has to happen in the classrooms and in the schoolhouse.
I want to speak to two things that stretched in credibility tonight. One was the simple fact that he said he hadn't seen the Marlene Quinn ad. Well, he is one of only 20% of the entire state of Ohio that hasn't seen the Marlene Quinn ad. And in fact, he has debated Dale Butlin over here several times and engaged him about it. The second thing that was very unique to me is that they are running an ad that talks about this study that seems to purport that public officials are paid 43% more than private. Well, the fact is that his own study commission has rebutted this. The Columbus Dispatch investigation and reporting on it has absolutely disdained it. And when we look outside the paid consultants, the simple fact that they did not research the facts, which this 43% sustains the bill, until 6 months after John Kasich signed it. They were not interested in research supporting legislation. They were interested in legislation and then found the research to make it justified.
Rhonda, a question for you. The opposition was saying that if we stay with status quo, this idea of levies, that obviously for this election we're seeing plenty of levies coming up, that we're just going to continue to drive into this financial predicament. What is your response to that about status quo?
You know that there will probably always be levies, but there is no such thing as status quo in education. You know that education changes every single day. You know our students bring something new to the classroom every day. So there is no such thing as status quo. We're working very hard to make sure that all of our children are educated and achieve at high levels. There is no status quo.
But in terms of the financial difficulties that we're in as a state and as each school district?
Well, you know, you have to take a look at each school district. But you have to understand, too, that teachers in school districts have made many of sacrifices to make sure that our students achieve and help to balance those budgets. So while there will probably always be levies, we certainly don't need to have a levy. The levy isn't because of what we're doing with collective bargaining.
Jack, do you think anybody's mind was changed here tonight?
Well, I think a lot of minds were changed, and don't forget that a lot of us are in this predicament in our local communities because the state has reneged on their local government fund. They've taken away money. They've forced local communities to go to the taxpayers to get money that the state has stolen from the local communities. You know, it's my firefighters, it is a math problem. My firefighters go to the negotiating table every time that they have to negotiate to make sure that they offset pay in order to have enough firefighters in the seats next to them. They do it all the time. We did it 2 years ago. We took a pay freeze in order to make sure we didn't lay off 300 firefighters because it is a math problem. It's a math problem. The federal government acknowledges it takes 4 firefighters to safely put out a fire and rescue a person, a baby like Zoe. And I'm going to do one thing that Senator Faber wouldn't do. I'm going to apologize to Marlene. I apologize to her. I'm not the one responsible, but it is a shame in the state of Ohio to have something like that happen and for that lady not to get an apology.
Jack, what about letting your fire chief, if it were to go through, letting the fire chief decide what's right and what's wrong?
Show me in Senate Bill 5, Issue 2, where it says the fire chief will decide that. What it says is the local elected government officials will decide that. It doesn't say the fire chief. There is no change that gives the fire chief the authority, the police chief the authority, anything like that. It says the people elected at the local government level are the ones that will make the decision. They will make the offer, and then they'll make the decision. That is inequity at its finest.